We're getting ready to mark the second anniversary of Russia's war on Ukraine. That's coming up just tomorrow on Saturday. High-level meetings are happening at the United Nations, and also today, announcements of new sanctions against Russia from Canada, the U.S., and European allies. The new American sanctions are some of the most aggressive penalties they have leveled on the Kremlin. They're meant to choke off billions of dollars in energy revenue. President Joe Biden said Russia is counting on allied support for Ukraine to waver. Biden said he won't let it happen.
We can't walk away now. And that's what Putin is betting on. He's betting on we're going to walk away. That's why I'll be speaking to the G7 folks, so some of the heads of the European Union and NATO today. That's why I'm announcing more than 500 new sanctions in response. In response to Putin's brutal war of conquest, in response to Alexei Navalny's death, because make no mistake, Putin is responsible for Alexei's death.
Journalist Benji Heyer is in Washington and takes us through these new measures and what they are intended to accomplish.
The administration calls this package massive, major, crushing. It's the biggest tranche since Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine 2 years ago. And President Biden says that they're being imposed to ensure that Russia and its President Vladimir Putin pay the price, he says, for death and destruction. The vast majority of these measures are designed to impede Russia's war effort further. So that could be by imposing restrictions to close existing gaps in the sanctions regime, for example, that Russia's been able to evade so far, penalising not just Russia but other countries or entities that are exporting equipment into Russia or those that are funding its major energy sector. These sanctions also target the state-owned operator of Russia's main payment system and private companies involved in powering Russia's defence industry. So wide-ranging, and the idea really is to hit Russia's economy hard. But we're talking here about already the most sanctioned country in the world. In spite of that, its economy remains larger than it did in February 2022, before the invasion. Now, Western officials insist this is a marathon, it's not a sprint. Sanctions can take years to show results. And the underlying argument from the White House is that it must be sending a clear message, one that has a tangible impact. The message being that history is watching. The failure to support Ukraine, says President Biden, to stand up to freedom will not be forgotten. And in accordance with that, he today urged lawmakers stateside to pass a bill that's stalled in Congress, but if approved, would provide tens of billions of dollars worth of aid to Ukraine.
But let me be clear. The House of Representatives must pass the bipartisan national security bill. The bill provides urgent funding for Ukraine, and it passed overwhelmingly in the Senate. And there's no question, none. If the Speaker called for a vote in the House, it would pass easily today. Instead, they went on vacation. I mean, it's just, well.
Benji, of course, these U.S. sanctions, they're partly in response to the death of Alexei Navalny, of course, a fierce Putin critic. Tell us more about that.
That's right. Included in these sanctions are a set that are specifically targeting individuals connected to Navalny's imprisonment. It's the sort of measures that we're also seeing from European countries aimed at the people who were working at the penal colony where he was held. This is something that President Biden's been threatening for days since he blamed Vladimir Putin for Navalny's death, something the Kremlin denies. And the White House says that these sanctions will help ensure Putin pays an even steeper price for his aggression abroad in regard to Ukraine and repression at home in relation to the treatment of critics like Navalny, both exemplifying what the State Department calls Putin's brazen disregard for human life. President Biden meeting yesterday with Navalny's widow and daughter, promising that his legacy of courage will live on.
We're going to take you to Ukraine now, where in just hours, the country will mark the moment 2 years ago when Russia began its invasion. Celia Mendoza of The Voice of America was there in the early days of the war, and she has returned to Ukraine this month, and she is now in Kyiv. So Celia, thank you for joining us again. We do appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Hillary.
Since you've been back, you have visited 2 cities. I'm hoping that you can tell us a little bit about them, where they are, and why you decided to go to those places.
These two cities are connected, even though they're in different regions. One is in the Kharkiv region, Izum. It was occupied by the Russians for 160 days. Now they are liberated, and people are coming back to their town, trying to rebuild, but they have the same emotions. The other one is Bucha, in the outskirts of Kyiv. It was occupied for 33 days, and both have evidence of massacres. They had mass graves. They also can tell that life is not the same after the occupation. We were there for a couple of days and were able to talk to the locals. People still have fear that the Russians may try to come back. But something that was very touching is the nationalism and how proud they are of their military forces, and also the fact that they were able to be freed from the Russians. One of the big issues they have now, both towns, which are basically 8 to 10 hours apart by car, is the mining. The efforts continue, but many of the locations, even children know that they cannot touch either in the forest, anything, or even toys or backpacks. We spoke with a little girl, and she said that she knows that the Russians left behind mines and explosives, and she never touches anything now when she goes outside.
So pride, but also fear, Celia. But I'm wondering sort of more overall, more broadly, how is the invasion? How is it being remembered? How is it being recalled there this week?
Right now, we have different events that are prepared for this Saturday, especially in the area of Bucha and Irpin. That became one of the most symbolic locations because it was the route that the Russians were trying to take from Belarus into Kyiv, and also because one of the airports there became the center of a battle. They're trying to remember things in a different way, but one of the main things that people are trying to do is go to the memorials. Tomorrow is going to be a memorial unveil in Bucha. A few months ago, they unveiled another memorial where you can find over 500 names. The youngest, a 2-year-old that was killed, the oldest, a 99-year-old. We spoke to Nicole Goldman. She is a local film producer that had been in the area during the past 2 years. And she expressed her emotion and what they feel now that they are trying to rebuild, but at the same time, they cannot forget what happened there. And we can listen what she said.
The cities, it's coming back to life. People are walking, children are, you hear the children's voices, but at the same time you understand that this place is a massacre. You understand that this place has so many of human tragedies that you feel a bit guilty to have fun here, to drink coffee, to just walk around, because you understand how many war crimes were committed here, how many people died here.
And Hillary, it's a profound feeling every time you step in one of these towns. And like I said, I was in Izum and I was in Bucha. And when you walk into the town and their streets, their houses, you can feel the sadness and the heaviness that they carry in their hearts at the same time that they're trying to move forward and rebuild in honor of those that were killed.
Celia, one example of the resilience that you're talking about here is a woman that you met. She's 103 years old. Her name is Olga. Can you tell us a little bit about her and what she represents?
She definitely represents what is Ukrainian pride. She lived through many, many things. She was an orphan at 5 years old, and even what is happening, she's able to smile. She's able to talk about her great-granddaughter. She asked about other people's projects, and she wishes everybody to be well. The only thing that is sad is knowing that she is living through this with the fears. She even told me that this was worse than the World War II that she lived through. one of the things that she also explained, and she lives in a very humble home with a bathroom on the front yard, is that she was near to the window and one of the missiles exploded. Her daughter came and tried to touch her, tell her if she was okay. She actually expressed to us that she says, "Are you alive, Mom? Are you alive?" And she kept repeating that, saying that she for a few weeks couldn't hear or see very well. But even though she lived through that and the occupation of the Russians, she had a message of resilience, of hope, and she says that she's a respected woman that is loved by everybody.
Celia, as always, thank you for this. Of course, just a few hours now until that moment 2 years ago when Ukraine, of course, will be marking that. But for now, thank you. Thanks for bringing us these stories. Celia Mendoza there of Voice of America in Kyiv.